You're listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Welcome back to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans. From the West Coast, I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Thursday, January 6th, and I'm very happy to be joined once again by fellow South Stands contributor Paige Van Horn from Denver. PVH, how's that first Heineken going down, buddy?
Oh, it's going down just gloriously, buddy. COVID-free, not a care in the world.
All right. I guess the question is that your first Heineken? Maybe you're a little further along than
it is my first Heineken. Post-COVID? That's a ridiculous question. It's about my 400th since I had COVID.
We're also joined by fellow South Stands contributor Chad Plummer from Cleveland. CP, what's the word from the 216?
Not too much, boys. Not too much. It's bitter cold. It's about 8 degrees here in Cleveland. The 216. It's not cool, man.
I am just not accustomed to that kind of cold anymore. I don't even know how I'd respond to that kind of cold. I mean, it's been like in the low 40s here, and we're all like, "Oh, it's freezing! Oh my God, let's turn the heat on." So my blood is thinned out since I moved from Ohio. We are here, of course, to have a second look at Ohio State's 48-45 comeback win over Utah in the Rose Bowl, because Chad and Paige, you guys did not have an opportunity yet to give us your thoughts on the result of that game. And then I'd also like to have a peek ahead to the Buckeyes 2022 season for a few minutes, if you guys will indulge me. But before we get into that, some pretty big news today. Offensive line coach Greg Studrawa has been informed by Ryan Day that after 6 seasons with the program, he will not be retained. Stud joins Matt Barnes, who left to be defensive coordinator at Memphis, as the second assistant to part ways with the program since the Rose Bowl. Paige, I want to start with you. You have to be delighted, my friend. Why don't you give me your thoughts both on Stud and Barnes moving on?
I mean, it's never cool when people get fired it's not. I don't take that much joy in it. I think it's important. I think the offensive line was definitely one area that did not excel this year. And we thought, at one point that was the best unit perhaps in the entire country. Mm-hmm. And as good as they were in pass protection, they weren't very good in pass protection against Michigan. And I do think they, Trayvon got nicked up and maybe he had feeling some wear by the end of the season, but I don't think there were big holes for him to run through that offensive line was generating, in the latter part of the season and even in the Rose Bowl for that matter. Mm-hmm. And you and I talked about it yesterday. And again, I don't know nearly enough about football to understand, the true nuances of offensive guards versus offensive tackles. But it dawned on me, looking back on this season, and I'm not really answering your question, but man, the guy they might have missed most from last year is perhaps Wyatt Davis, right? Yeah. Just that junkyard dog guard that is just going to open up holes. I guess they're a little shorter and, they just get in there and mix it up more. I think it's a good thing. I think it absolutely is the right decision. And then the last thing I'll say about it is, I do think it speaks volumes to Ryan Day's commitment to literally actually being, the head coach at Ohio State. There's some rumors out there that, he's a candidate for some NFL jobs. I don't think you're making all these moves if you're destined for the NFL. And I think that's sort of like an intangible positive sign. So, hey, I wish Stud the best. It'd be interesting moving forward, who the new guy is and what schemes they come up with. But I do think it's definitely a positive move.
Yeah, I think so too. How about you, Chad? Any thoughts on either Stud or Matt Barnes moving on you want to share?
Not really. Obviously, I've gone back and forth on this, and I think I was a big backer of Stud a couple of years ago. Obviously the guy can recruit. With some of the offensive linemen that he brought in. But I just think there was some very questionable decisions made this year. It also goes back to what I've said, and I hope another one on that list. I've been saying a couple nonchalant prayers about Al Washington being removed as well. But with regards to that and Stud, it's player development.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure. Well, I'm pretty sure that it's not living up to the fullest potential of these kids. So, as far as Matt Barnes goes, hey, good for him. What's he going to be, the defensive
DC
coordinator at Memphis?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So good for him. I mean, he came in, had that thrown on him, when after the Oregon loss, and I think he, did a little bit better. But good for him. I'm not going to lose any sleep over those two being gone. I just want Washington to be gone as well, and I'll be happy.
Yeah, you have to think in the case of Stud, and we talked about this before, the mixed results all season from starting 4 tackles on the offensive line was probably at least somewhat of a factor in the final result here. And the dreadful performance by the offensive line against Michigan. I don't know. I mean, it didn't look like there was any plan for dealing with Hutchinson or Ojabo in that game. And that might have very well have been the last nail in the coffin for Stud. I was actually listening to the Buckeye Talk podcast today. They were talking about Stud being let go. And Les Maurice actually feels like it is largely around recruiting that he was let go. While there were some big recruiting wins over the last couple of years with Studrawa, Les Maurice said that it was kind of a team effort. It wasn't all Stud, and in some cases he had to be kind of prodded to get out there and and meet with these kids. And he really wasn't doing the work that he needed to do to kind of really stay connected to recruits. One thing that he did say, and this is kind of funny, it's a small thing, but I think it really speaks to what you have to do in this day and age to stay connected to kids, is he was terrible about using Twitter, which seems really stupid. But I mean, again, in this day and age, this is how these kids, stay connected to what's going on. And he also did have back surgery during the offseason as well. And probably just a good time to move on from Stud. I don't think he was terrible. Like, I don't think he was an abject failure like, Bill Davis was at linebacker coach, but it just seemed like the time was right to move on from Studwawa, I think. And so I'm happy to see that. Now, the name I keep hearing is Justin Fry. He is currently both the offensive coordinator and offensive line coach at UCLA, and Day has a connection to Fry. They both coached together at Temple and at Boston College. And, they both come off the Chip Kelly coaching tree. So actually what I'm hearing is at least one fan site is reporting that it's a done deal and that Justin Fry is going to be the next offensive line coach, but nothing finalized yet. That's just what I'm hearing. Fry might be the next guy in line.
That's funny because, there's very strong legs to Caleb Williams actually going to UCLA.
Really?
So maybe
interesting.
Chip's thinking about bringing another offensive coordinator in there that's going to, or just take it over himself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That would make sense if that's going to happen. Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, let's have a look back at the Rose Bowl, fellas. The Buckeyes, as we all know, bounced back from probably their worst half of football all season. Certainly we can say that for the defense, and overcame a 14-point halftime deficit to beat the Utes in the Rose Bowl, 48-45. Paige, I got a question for you. Now, I believe your grade for the 2021 season was somewhere between a D and an F. Did that win in the Rose Bowl do anything to change your grade for the 2021 season?
Oh, maybe. I mean, I think for the overall season, okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe I was a little harsh. I can take him up to a D+.
Paige, come on.
From just an abject failure.
I'm not taking him to a D+.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Chad, let me get your. So how about you? Would you change your grade? I believe you used the words epic failure to describe the 2021 season.
Well, I'm not quite sure that I used epic failure, but I think somebody else made it out like I was saying it was an epic failure. I think it was a failure by all means, but epic, that's a little aggressive.
Okay. So would you change your grade? Would you give the...
I would probably take it from an F to, I mean, you know what? It's really hard because I'm that game is just gave us a glimpse of the future.
Right.
And I mean, it was Olave and Wilson who, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That was kind of cool.
But, I mean, that's exciting. But that really doesn't do it for me. I mean, I might take him up to a D.
Okay.
I'll go there.
Okay. Hold that thought, CP. I'm gonna get back to you in a moment. Paige, I'm gonna kick this back to you. Obviously, a lot of fireworks in the Rose Bowl on Saturday. The stands were packed. thanks largely to Utah fans, of course. Both teams combined for 93 points, 1,146 yards of offense. Records were broken. Dudes were being carted off the field. Each team had targeting ejections. Both teams were shorthanded, had to use offensive players on defense. What did you see on Saturday afternoon in the Rose Bowl that stood out, Paige?
Before I answer that, I think the interesting thing is, when you're in a game like that and you're not in the playoffs, it is kind of, it's a win-win, right? Like the whole first half, I'm like, who gives a shit? It doesn't even matter, right? Like this is just reinforcement of just the abject, utter failure of this team this year. I hope, does it really matter, that they lose this game? And I was exceptionally calm through just, witnessing that defensive performance and then the special teams performance in the first half. And you just kind of don't really give a shit. Like if that was a semifinal game, we would have been losing, or I would have been losing my mind. I'm presuming everyone else.
Oh yeah, for sure.
In Buckeye Nation would have been losing my mind. So I was actually I was kind of laughing through, right? You just almost had to laugh at it.
Right.
But then, and we talked about it at halftime, it just kind of dawned on me. It's like, it reminded me of watching a basketball game or any type of situation in sports where one team just does absolutely everything right. And they're like launching shots maybe from half court and it goes in and you're just like, you know what, man, if you're going to do that, then I tip my cap to you. You're going to win this game. Right. We have turnovers. We give up a touchdown off a kickoff. But I just didn't think they could keep it up. And, we could see what Ohio State could do on offense and they can score at will. And so I just had this strange confidence that somehow they would come back and win it. I think to answer your question, though, it kind of comes back to, how many national championships have we left on the table by not having a competent defense over the last, since 2014, 2015? It's really frustrating.
Embarrassing.
And, like I've said 1,000 times, right? You don't have to have a top 10 defense, but you're Ohio State. You can't be ranked 100 in total defense. It's just not okay. It's just not, there's just no excuse. Yeah. It's completely unacceptable.
Right.
And it goes back to, that team never reached its ceiling because they're constantly being held back by atrocious defenses. And so obviously we're going to look to the future and hopefully that's a thing of the past. So it kind of is frustrating in that regard. The offense, how do you not, and Chad alluded to it, like, dude, Harrison Jr. and Buckeye are going to be as good or even not better than the two guys that are going to be first round draft picks. And that's not hyperbole. It's insane.
It's insane.
And then the last thing I will say, and it goes, I'm tired of the argument of these coaches that underachieve and like they're good recruiters. That's horseshit. Anybody can recruit at Ohio State. My dog Bronx, the freaking French bulldog, can recruit at Ohio State. Kids want to play there. Look at Brian Hartline. Look no further. Why not go get Orlando Pace to be our offensive line coach, for Christ's sake, if this guy from UCLA doesn't work out? I talked about laryngitis probably one time in the last 3 years. Guess what? He's going to be at Notre Dame. Yeah. So, fix that problem and they'll have a national championship within 2 years.
Chad, how about you? What did you see on Saturday in the Rose Bowl that really stood out to you?
Well, it's so funny, guys. Normally that would have been, that just the way that game started, I would have just been chain smoking, throwing shit, like just yelling. And I just was like, so the Coug had her, a couple of her daughters and one of their boyfriends and her son and his girlfriend over here. And I was like, that's just calm as could be. I was just like, you know what? This is just, I mean, obviously, as I'm doing right now, I rub my forehead quite often, but it's just like, I didn't get upset. I was just like, you know what? This is just, this is icing on the cake for what our season ended up playing out to be. But, I was sitting there thinking to myself, like, we've been strong in the second half more than a couple occasions this season. Mm-hmm. And I was like, they're out everything, like Paige said, everything is going their way. It's just like, like whatever, a basketball player making every shot, or a golfer like rolling in every putt. You know what I mean? Like we're just, everything they were doing was right. And I was like, just sitting there thinking to myself, you know what? I'm not like, I'm just going to sit here and just watch it unfold. But I was like, do they have enough like to, keep up with the speed and the other things, the intangibles in the second half? So I kind of like, took a couple deep breaths, and I'm like, all right, well, I don't think they do. Let's see what happens. But, it's like, it's frustrating, man. And I think we talked about this like a couple times. And I know I talked with you, Zach, last week about just the fact that who was the last big linebacker that we had at Ohio State?
Yeah.
I mean, really, you think about it. Like, I mean, think back and I'm like, wow. I mean,
the last playmaker, the last guy that made legit, like eye-popping plays. I mean, I'd have to go all the way back to like, that's not going too far back, but Jerome Baker was the last guy that made a lot of just big plays, right? Creating turnovers, pick sixes, fumble recoveries. Yep. And he wasn't even the best of them by far, right? But he's the last one that I can remember that you felt his presence.
Right. And you know what? And that's where I go back to like Washington, which really just, the player development is just, it's so piss poor. That's what I have a problem with. And I hope, because we've got some really good young kids at linebacker, and we've got a couple kids coming in like CJ Hicks and Gabe Powers and those guys. I just hope that they get developed, because you know what I mean? It's embarrassing to have, like, you can't even say, like, I mean, nobody in anywhere else on any other, like, fan from any other conference or whatever could name one linebacker at Ohio State. You know what I mean? It's just, it's sad. And I can't get myself over it, but.
So, but anyway. the irony is the defensive MVP for the Rose Bowl was Tommy Eichenberg.
I know.
But no, I mean, I think we're all with you. We're following you, right? The defense, and Paige, you made reference to this as well. Defense was a major disappointment in the first half. They did come to life in the second half, though. We'll talk about that in a second. Chad, how about anything else that stood out to you from Saturday you want to mention?
I mean, it just, I there was missed tackles. I mean, I know we'll probably get to the offense, but they were playing ball. I mean, the offensive line, they stepped up, they played as a unit. I mean, like Mayan went, like, I know like Meatball, he got in there, he had some nice runs, got the little spark going for the run game there. But
how about CJ Stroud's run in the first half, Chad?
I'm glad you said that, because I totally forgot about it. Like, that was he got a nice first down. He picked
that was a big
up.
third. That was a
well,
big
it
first.
was.
Yeah, that was their
Nobody
first scoring
open.
drive, and it really kind of helped spark them.
Thank you for bringing that up there.
Yeah, 10-yard gain. I think it was on second and long. He got him 10 yards to convert the first down, and then shortly after that, he hit Emeka Egbuka down the sideline for that nice 30-yard reception where Egbuka kind of tight-roped the sideline. And honestly, I think after that point, Ohio State offensively never really looked back. I mean, that really sparked the offense.
Let's just hope that we get and I know we were going to talk to him a little bit, like about him a little bit, but I really, just from what I've read, and I've read quite a bit, I'm really excited. I've got a positive outlook moving forward with Knowles, just what I've read about him. I think it's just going to be a more disciplined, like hard nosed, like play like football shit, like he's going to bring in here. So I'm hoping that that's what the case is. And I mean, how nice would it be to have two units that you can count on? We know our offense is going to go out there and can play and score on anybody. I just want to see the defense be able to like actually stop somebody, like just.
Yeah. It was really interesting because the defense, I think
they had some stops.
Well, right. Well, first of all, I didn't think that they could sink any lower than the Michigan game. And I think they actually reached their lowest point of the season in the first half on that long touchdown run.
Okay, let me pause you there.
Yeah.
Is that the lowest you've seen going back to, say, the 2018 team?
The Purdue game, yeah. Well, that's and I mentioned this on Sunday's pod, and I made the comparison to the very end of the blowout Purdue loss when Rondale Moore broke like 17 tackles to score a touchdown. And it was some of the worst effort I've ever seen in my life. And he got spun around and the defensive back just let him go and kind of released him toward the end zone. So yeah, I mean, it was that kind of a low. And it was after Rising ripped off that 62-yard touchdown run. And I think he broke the tackle of Taraji Mitchell. Had no business, by the way, being out there playing. He had some giant wrap around his leg. But, a bunch of Buckeyes had a shot at him. He breaks free, runs untouched down the sidelines. I thought that was the lowest point of the season for the Ohio State defense right there. And I tweeted out from the South Stands Twitter account that I thought it was an utter disgrace to the Silver Bullet legacy at Ohio State. I was embarrassed to be an Ohio State fan at that stage. So, I mean, it couldn't have gotten any lower. That was rock bottom for the Ohio State defense. And then they go into the half and come out in the second half, and they're completely transformed as a defense, which is amazing to me if you consider. I mean, it was miraculous, really, and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. Consider this. I mean, they started the game without their two best players at the three technique, Haskell Garrett and Antoine Jackson. Garrett was an opt-out, as you guys know. Antoine Jackson was injured. Down their starting middle linebacker, Cody Simon. No Javonte Jean-Baptiste, very important rotational player at defensive end. Marcus Williamson, sounds like maybe he was being disciplined. He didn't make the trip. He was probably their best cover safety. Then during the course of the game, they lose Jack Sawyer in the first half to a targeting ejection. Shortly after that, they lose Lathan Ransom to that horrible, gruesome injury. Prayers up for Ransom, by the way. So you consider they've lost all that personnel. Either to start the game, they lose two more important players during the course of the first half. They obviously play like shit, right, against you. They give up 4 consecutive touchdown scoring drives to the Utah offense, and then sprinkled in the middle of that was the kick return for a touchdown. Let me throw a couple numbers here to you guys. Utah offense in the first half, 324 total yards, 8.1 yards per play, 28 points scored by the Utah offense. And then in addition to that is the 97-yard kick return for a touchdown. So the story comes out after the game. DeMario McCall gives an impassioned speech at halftime to the defense.
I think that's awesome.
I think that's great. Defense comes out in the second half. The Utah offense, 139 total yards, 4.96 yards per play and only 10 points. If you look at the fourth quarter, Utah offense, only 53 yards, 4.41 yards per play. So I just think that's miraculous that the Ohio State defense, hit that emotional rock bottom at the end of the first half. They're down serious personnel to start the game. They lose even more personnel during the game. And then they come out in the second half and do that. That was just miraculous to me. I was really hard, by the way, on the defense in the pod that I did on Sunday. And now kind of upon reflection, I'm like, holy shit, it's pretty remarkable what they did in those last 2 quarters. Now, I don't think it has any bearing on the future, right? Because as you've mentioned, Chad, Knowles is coming in. He's going to, etch-a-sketch it, as you like to use that term, Chad.
Yeah,
he's going to be starting fresh, right? With probably new personnel, new scheme, all that stuff. But pretty remarkable second half there. And I think we were all hinting at it here to start the pod off. Like, this is a meaningless game in the eyes of a lot of Ohio State fans. Ohio State could have laid down, could have gotten blown off the field. And it looked very much like that's where we were headed. But they turn around, play with great pride, and end up winning the game. I guess this must mean something to somebody that they played that well and they got the win. Anyway, that was one of my big takeaways was just this miraculous turnaround by a shorthanded defense that had just reached this emotional, rock bottom. I just think it was a miracle that they played that well in the second half. It was crazy.
I have a theory why that happened, though.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah,
because our third fucking string defensive player is better than any other player on Utah. It's just it all comes down to coaching and scheme. It's really on defense. It's not that hard. My guy here, you just guard him. You guard him. You do this. You got the linebacker. You've got the running back. And you'll be fine. And I take no credit for this, but I thought it was really funny. I think it was Landis who said it. Like, once again, Ohio State defenders are just covering grass.
Yeah.
Right.
I saw that tweet too.
Yeah. It's just like, it's not that hard on defense, right? I mean, there can be some misdirections and they can cause some confusion, but again, like when you have tough Borland trying to guard Devontae Smith in a national championship game, like that's a bad idea.
It's coaching.
Just put Ward on him wherever he goes and you live and die with it. And I think they just kindly figured it out.
I think they did do that.
Kind of figured it out. And But I give them credit. Totally give them credit. They were awesome in that. I forgot about Hickman's, like that stop
big
on
fourth down stop. That was huge. Yeah.
That was huge. You know, it's like, you got to make those plays. And they had some good tackles for loss. We didn't see those all year, but come on. There's no excuse for they recruit pretty well on the defensive side of the ball at Ohio State, just like they do on offense.
Yeah, no, you're right. And you know what? I don't know this to actually be true, but I could swear Ohio State played more man coverage in the second half, and they took away a lot of those absurdly easy completions that Rising was making against that really soft zone coverage. To me, that seemed to make a difference. And then they just played harder. And the other thing I thought you were going to say when you mentioned you had a theory about this was that maybe some of the guys a little further down the depth chart are better than the guys that they've been playing. A player like Cade Stover, right? Yeah. Who's been playing tight end the whole season. He might be a better linebacker than anybody that's been playing at that position all season long. Court Williams, another guy, they've been talking about him all season, haven't been able to find a role for him. Well, he comes in, he gives them a big sack right in the second half, knocks out Rising on the play. So maybe it was also too that guys who might turn out to be better players actually got an opportunity in this game, and that's why they played a little bit better in the second half.
On that quarterback.
Ugh. Well, hey, look, he seems like a good kid and everything. I mean, you don't want to wish that kind of an injury on the kid. That was a really scary injury, but
let's just.
He was a little chesty, but he didn't.
Right.
Yeah, he's just hot dog prancing down the fucking sideline like he's Deion Sanders. Come on, dude.
Yeah, well, yeah, he definitely he took a shot there. That was scary. You could tell he was concussed for sure. Another thing that I wanted to echo what you had said, I believe, Paige, was, just the play of C.J. Stroud and Jackson Smith-Njigba together. I really felt the Rose Bowl validated both, especially Stroud, but also Jackson Smith-Njigba as really truly great players in their own rights. I think for much of the season, the book on C.J. Stroud, both within the Ohio State fan base and outside of it, was that his production was largely the byproduct of having Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave to throw to. But, no Wilson or Olave in the Rose Bowl. Stroud completes 80% of his passes, 573 yards and 6 touchdowns. I mean, in the fourth quarter with the game on the line, Stroud was 14 of 15 for 165 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, he was dropping balls in buckets all game long. I mean, I could count 10 throws that were NFL throws. Like, oh my God, how did he complete that? He was an absolute surgeon. And some people say, well, okay, but he's throwing to Jackson Smith-Njigba, which is true. He was his primary target. However, Stroud completed 22 other throws to 6 other receivers for 226 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he really spread the ball around 7 different receivers. I think this is a validating performance for CJ Stroud. He really stands on his own merits as a great quarterback. And I think you could also say the same thing of Jackson Smith-Njigba right now with that performance and the way he performed down the stretch of the second half of the season, the huge numbers he put up. I mean, he clearly stands on his own merits as one of the greatest to ever play at Ohio State. And I mean, like in my view, he can stand shoulder to shoulder, not just with Wilson and Olave, but Chris Carter, Terry Glenn, David Boston, Michael Thomas. I mean, he's every bit as good as those guys. So that was another big takeaway, right?
Felt bad for him, man, on that fumble, because that
Clark Phillips, man, he was
Williams, good. Phillips, he was like an Ohio State commit,
and he had a pick in the end zone too. Phillips actually played really well for Utah. You could see he'd have looked damn nice in a scarlet and gray, wouldn't he? Phillips is a hell of a player.
But that was like how you're supposed to do it, like that technique. I mean, he grabbed his left arm so he couldn't wrap the ball up and they knocked it out. I mean, you got to give him props, but I felt bad. Smith was on the sideline. He was bummed out, man.
Yeah, well, it turned out he'd more than make up for it, man. He was awesome. On the topic of the Ohio State linebackers, one other observation I want to share with you guys, and then we can move on here. But I got to give Tommy Eichenberg a little bit of credit. Initially, when I saw that he had won the defensive MVP, I was like, oh yeah, right. He got 17 tackles, but like there were 8 or 9 yards downfield every time. But that actually wasn't true. I mean, Ohio State, when they got the ball to start the third quarter, within 3 plays, they're knocking on the door at the Utah 20, and then Stroud throws that pick in the end zone to Clark Phillips. I mean, think about where Ohio State was mentally at that stage, right? They're down 14. They had just had that play that you mentioned, Chad, in the second quarter, where Smith-Njigba gets the ball punched out by Phillips as he's heading into the end zone. Now the interception in the end zone. Utah has the ball again. They're up 14. I mean, and then on their first play from scrimmage after that, Eichenberg shoots the gap on Utah's first play, dumps Tavion Thomas for a 5-yard loss. It puts them behind the chains there, puts Utah off schedule, and then they would eventually punt, and that was when the punter muffed the snap. Ohio State falls on it. They score to cut the lead to 7. That was absolutely huge. I got to give Eichenberg credit for the response there and turning in a big play. How many times have we seen that this year, guys? A linebacker shooting the gap and dumping a guy for a loss.
5.
Right. You can count on one hand the number of times that happened. And then Eichenberg on Utah's possession, next possession after that, they had 1st and 10 at the Ohio State 11. Eichenberg stops Micah Bernard for a 1-yard gain on first down. Then he cuts down that quick little receiver who had the kick return for a touchdown, Britton Covey, on a jet sweep for a 2-yard gain. Utah is suddenly 3rd and long. They end up having to settle for a field goal on that drive, which I thought was huge. And it was actually at that point where I thought Ohio State had a legit shot. They got the stop. They forced the field goal. And that's when I really started to believe Ohio State had a chance to win. So I give credit to Eichenberg, man. He came up with some big plays in the second half. Now, here's a question for you guys about Eichenberg, though. What are the chances he gets the Brendan White treatment, right? Rose Bowl MVP, but the following season, new coordinator, new defense, White's out. He ends up transferring. What do you think that, I mean, probably a pretty good chance that Eichenberg gets the Brendan White treatment, right? What do you think, Paige?
Yeah, but like, okay, who's going to take his job? I mean, okay, we talk about CJ Hicks. He's a freshman.
Yeah.
Since Andy Katzenmoyer, that really doesn't happen. Maybe Shazier. I asked that question before. Like, when's the last time a
that's another
freshman linebacker comes in and makes a huge impact?
Very rare. Very rare.
It's rare. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's possible. I get your point. I definitely think it is, but I just don't know that they have the depth at that position unless they go out and get somebody, in the portal, then it's possible. But I do think, I still think that is maybe the biggest question mark going into next season, again, is going to be linebacker play. Yeah. So maybe possible. I don't know.
Well, the other thing too is, look, you've got Wisconsin and Iowa on the schedule next year, in addition to Michigan. And Eichenberg is the kind of player you're going to need in a game like that. I would think there's a role for him if Knowles puts him in the right position.
Yeah, I think he'll be a big part of the defense next year. I mean, I don't think Knowles is going to come in and like take him out. I mean, you've got Reed Carrico, who I think, like, if you get somebody like Knowles in, like, again, like, these kids are not getting developed properly. I think Reed Carrico, that kid was a stud. He's got potential, and then you got Cody Simon. I don't know what he's going to do. But Mitchell Melton, who was hurt, that kid is got a lot of talent too. But like, his playing time was limited this year due to injury.
Diamante Trainum, the transfer from Arizona State. He's converting from running back to linebacker, but this was a dude at Akron Hoban. It was actually a legit linebacker prospect. He had a lot of Power 5 offers to play linebacker. He might be a factor at linebacker for them.
Now, what about, I know this, like, I never say his name, Palo Alto or whatever.
Yeah, Neote Ote. Yeah.
He's got a year of eligibility, correct?
He does. I think he has to make a decision, and he's another guy. I mean, I think they have plenty of bodies, right, but to have some competition in that room. But I agree with you. You said it at the top, Chad. I think they need new leadership in that room.
Yeah. I think CJ Hicks will. If he's not starting at the beginning there, he will be starting by the 3rd or 4th game. I
think given his recruiting profile, and Paige, you make a good point, right? It's very rare that you see freshmen start at linebacker, but he has the recruiting profile of a player that could do it. I'm actually hopeful that he's at least in the rotation, Hicks, because I'm with you, Chad. I'd be disappointed if he's not. All right. Guys, anything else you want to share from the Rose Bowl before we kind of peek ahead to the 2022 season? Paige, you got anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I think 2 things. Number one, I think we forget that Stroud was a first-year starter.
Yep.
Man, I'd be pretty goddamn scared of that guy next year.
Oh my God.
If the game slows down even just a fraction more for him, man, the ceiling for him is frightening.
Frightening.
And the other thing is, I don't think it was a meaningless win. I do think it does matter. The fact that those young guys played is always huge for the next season. But I do think, like sometimes it's just coach speak or hyperbole and like, yeah, this is huge for us going into next season. I kind of think it is. because that team is so young and they showed a hell of a lot of resilience, and they came back and won that game, still the Rose Bowl. And I do think it'll translate. I think it, I just think about all off season and, training and all that stuff. And, where's your headspace on that coming off of 2 losses? You got blown out, especially like you had talked about that, Zach, like just don't get blown out.
Right.
That could have knocked them back on their heels. The fact that they came back and won that game, I do think it's important. I think it matters.
I agree.
And I think it does set them up for next year.
I totally agree. I was listening to, our old buddy Doug Maurice talk about this. He had a different view of it, which was, he used the 2013 season as an example, right? Ohio State gets upset in the Big Ten title game by Michigan State, and they don't, they miss the BCS title game. Then they go to the Orange Bowl and play a quote unquote meaningless game with Clemson. They lose that game too, so they're coming into the following season on a 2-game losing streak, but then they ended up winning the national championship. And he was using that example to illustrate his point, which was that, I don't know, they could have lost, and they could have even lost convincingly against Utah, and it wouldn't have mattered because you've got Jim Knowles coming in. You wipe the slate clean. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to right the ship the following year. But I agree with you. I think the win was huge for momentum into the 2022 season, and it was huge that it was first and second year players leading them to that win. Let's just spend a few minutes here. I know we're coming up in about 45 minutes here, but why don't we spend a few minutes looking ahead to next season? We've got 2 pretty big draft eligible players yet to make their NFL decisions. That's defensive end Zach Harrison and right tackle DeJuan Jones. But from what I've been hearing, and guys, tell me if you've been hearing anything differently, it seems like there's a good chance both of them come back next season. And if that happens, on offense, 9 of the 11 starters who started the Rose Bowl would return, including Stroud, Smith-Njigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., Julian Fleming, Travion Henderson, Luke Whippler, Matthew Jones, Paris Johnson Jr., and DeJuan Jones. So that's 4 of 5 starters on the offensive line. And you add to that group Emeka Egbuka, who I think is going to take Julian Fleming's spot, by the way. I think Julian Fleming is going to have to be happy with being the 4th guy in that rotation.
He's going to be the number 1 guy in Michigan.
Yeah, right. I'm on alert for him to the transfer portal, but technically he's a returning starter. Egbuka comes back as well, and then you also add sophomore guard Donovan Jackson. He was a very highly rated guard in the 2021 class. He could potentially start at one of the guard spots, and then we're going to get Harry Miller back as well, fellas, from injury. So a lot of returning talent and experience on offense. At least 9 starters. We're going to be fine there. Defense, from the starting 11 at the Rose Bowl, I count 8 of 11. Now, we're not sure every single one of these guys is actually going to have a role in Jim Knowles' defense, but those players are Denzel Burke and Cam Brown at corner, Ronnie Hickman, Bryson Shaw at safety, Court Williams, who's kind of like that. Yeah, right. Shaw, I think, would be one of the odd men out, I would guess. Court Williams, who's kind of a safety hybrid linebacker type. Zach Harrison, we think. Steele Chambers. Cade Stover, assuming he stays at linebacker. I actually kind of like what I saw out of Stover in the Rose Bowl. So it could be as many as 10 if Jerron Cage comes back. He was technically a starter. He would be a super senior, Cage would, if he wanted to come back for his 6th year. Teron Vincent is another guy who would be a 5th year senior. I think Vincent comes back. So it could be as many as 10 of the 11 who started the Rose Bowl. I count at least 8. And then you add to that group Cody Simon, who was injured, and then technically Lathan Ransom. But I honestly think Ransom's probably going to miss the whole season. That injury looked pretty gruesome. So a lot of returning talent and experience. And then on special teams, Noah Ruggles will have 1 more year of eligibility left. He was good for them this year, right? And then Jesse Mirko, the punter, he was only a freshman. So I think you figure they're both back. Then a couple young players that we expect to take a leap, right? JT Tuimoloau out, Jack Sawyer, Tyleek Williams, Ja'Kalen Johnson, Jordan Hancock at corner. Now, those guys didn't play much, but very talented,
those
right?
Are all badass
guys
listed right there.
Incoming freshman CJ Hicks. We talked about him briefly at linebacker. Sonny Styles, who safety, badass, could even play linebacker for them. So all those names I just mentioned, guys, future would seem to be very, very bright. Paige, I want to kick this to you. What are you expecting out of Ohio State in 2022, given all those names that I've just mentioned?
Wow, that was like arousing, Zach. I'm pretty excited for next year.
Yeah, I felt movement.
It's always the same expectations. It's always the same.
Always
right?
the same, right?
I mean, it's at least minimum playoff and then try and win a national championship. And I mean, anything less than that will be a bummer. I wouldn't say it's a failure. I don't want to be, but
it's playoff or bust.
Yeah.
I
mean, that's astonishing. How, the guys you just named off. I mean, like you named off what, eight of the starters on defense, and two of the best ones might be Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau. And, that wasn't even in your first sort of rundown there. All we need is a good defense. That's it. That's all we need. Offense will not skip a beat. I expect it to take the next level with, the run game getting the offensive line getting sort of squared away. And so, it's playoff for sure. The schedule is rough, interesting.
Yeah.
It's funny. They get those two crossover games. I read that earlier today, and you mentioned it earlier. It's Iowa and Wisconsin. Like, that's the gauntlet in the Big Ten, but I think they're both in Columbus.
They're both in Columbus. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is Michigan.
They go to Happy Valley. So I mean, as long as nothing crazy happens between now and then, it's definitely playoffs, and that team is set up to win a national championship.
I totally agree. Chad, before I kick it to you, I also want to add 2 transfer portal additions. I've already mentioned Diamante Trainum, the transfer from Arizona State. Really interesting player, Trainum. He ran for 692 yards and 10 touchdowns in 2 seasons at Arizona State, 5.5 yards per carry, but he's not going to play running back at Ohio State. He's going to play linebacker for Jim Knowles. Now, at Akron-Hoban, he played all over the field, running back, linebacker, and safety. He had legit Power 5 offers out of high school to play linebacker. He's 5'11", 235. To me, he's very reminiscent of Brian Roll. You guys remember Brian Roll? Played 2009, 2010. A little short, undersized, but really good athlete, fast. And interestingly, at 235, man, he already has a linebacker body. He's not like Steel Chambers, who's still kind of playing at a running back weight of 220. I mean, he's at great short area quickness. Look him up on YouTube and watch some of his high school tape on defense. I'm telling you, man, I swear he's a Brian Roll clone. Very interesting addition. And then one other transfer portal addition just announced this past week. Safety cornerback Tanner McAllister from Oklahoma State he was a 2-year starter for Jim Knowles on that defense. He has a solid 68.0 PFF grade, played just under 700 snaps for Oklahoma State. Bill Landis said that McAllister is likely to play kind of a slot corner cover safety type role. So similar to what Lathan Ransom played for Ohio State, right?
I mean, on paper, like, damn. And, I guess I've been like kind of like on the fence with the Zach Harrison thing. But I don't think that you can have, enough of those players. I mean, like, obviously we've seen, I think like with Knowles coming in, you're not going to see some of the things we've seen in the past. I think you're going to see the best players on the field. Mm-hmm. So, hey, if Zach decides to come back and he wants to bust his ass and like over winter and come back in, let Mickey get him all like, even more jacked up and focused, because like, I feel like, he was one of the most highly touted recruits coming out of like high school. And like, I mean, he should have, like, if he would have lived up to all the expectations and the hype, he would have been gone last year.
It's interesting about Harrison, not to interrupt you, Chad, but since we're on the topic, he has not, we all put Chase Young expectations on Harrison, Joey Bosa type expectations on him. But I'm looking at his Pro Football Focus grade for the season. He's the only Ohio State defensive player that's graded over 80 for the season. He's Ohio State's #1 graded defensive player this year. Wow. 82 is his grade. He came up with what they call stop plays, 27 stops for Ohio State. That leads Ohio State, or second actually, on the team for Ohio State. Great athlete. I wonder if there might be a different role for Harrison than just a straight up edge rusher at defensive end, under Jim Knowles. Did you guys notice, and I went back and rewatched part of the game today on that long touchdown run by Cameron Rising. If you get a chance to watch that again, you'll see Zach Harrison comes all the way from back of the pack,
galloping up ground,
and he outruns Bryson Shaw to Rising. Yeah. He doesn't catch him, but he's absurd at the absurd display of athleticism for Harrison. So could there be a different role for him in Jim Knowles' offense? And if I'm Jim Knowles, I mean, that's what I do. That's the first guy I sit down and talk to and say, look, here's what I'm going to do in my defense for you. Because he's got NFL level athleticism. Anyway, sorry about that, Chad. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but since we were on the topic.
No, man. I'm glad you brought that up because I was watching that. And I'm like, Jesus. And it doesn't even look, when you watch that, you watch him from the backside, it doesn't even look like he's moving that fast.
He's an unbelievable
when you realize that he's passing Shaw, you're like, holy shit.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember
you got to go back and watch that PV.
I'll find the clip and I'll text it to you guys because it wasn't until yesterday that I noticed that. And Rising was already gone for the touchdown. There was no way that Harrison was going to catch him, but he outran our starting safety, which I don't know if that speaks too highly of Bryson Shaw to get run down by a defensive end.
A good thing or a bad thing?
But he was rolling though, man.
Oh man! So
rolling on New Year's.
Rolling.
You know that well, buddy.
Yeah, buddy.
So sky's the limit. I think we agree. I mean, I think we're all expecting, and it's reasonable to expect that with a full off season and the talent that Knowles has at his disposal, we're going to see, a vast improvement from the defense. Okay, they might not be the number one defense in the country next year because from what I understand, Knowles' scheme is pretty complex and, it might take a while for the kids to learn it. But I think it's reasonable to expect leaps and bounds better defensively than they were this year. The offense, we've already gone through that. What they have returning, I defy anybody to find me more offensive skill talent anywhere else in the country than what Ohio State is bringing back.
Right.
And CJ Stroud's got the eye of the tiger, man. I mean, you saw it in the Rose Bowl. And Paige, as you said, if the game continues to slow down for him, watch out.
And I think that someone we haven't mentioned because we didn't see him on the field this year, but I think he'll have a role next year because he was the number 2 running back, number 1 all-purpose running back coming out of high school, Evan Pryor.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to see the
CP.
field next year. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think that's going to be a nice little piece for CJ as well.
I agree. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him as well. Yeah, for sure.
And the last 2 guys, you and I talked about it, Zach. Josh Proctor and Cam Brown.
Oh, yeah.
Makes a big difference.
Completely forgot about that. Josh Proctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Brian Shaw's got to go.
He's got to go.
You know what's interesting is Knowles likes to play a lot with 3 safeties. He runs a 4-2-5. And he likes to play a lot with 3 safeties. So that'll be interesting because we've already said it. You got Wisconsin and Iowa on the schedule and Michigan. Can you get away with playing 4 safeties against, those type of offenses in the Big Ten? You can do it in the Big 12. It'll be interesting to see how Knowles modifies his approach for opponents like Iowa and Wisconsin. Maybe he doesn't.
I'm looking forward to him having the like a Jack Sawyer being like standing up and not being that, putting the knuckles in the ground, having that kind of a rusher. I'm excited to see something like that too.
Yeah. Will it be him or will it be, somebody like Zach Harrison, who's probably a better athlete?
True. Good point.
Yeah.
Right.
He calls it the Jack position. I think we're going to call it the Jackie position to honor you, CP. But
Jackie.
But
Paige, Jackie Van Horn.
I can't wait. I'm really excited about Knowles and what that, It's time, I mean, dating all the way back to 2018, it's been an abomination defensively. I mean, come on.
$2 million too, man.
He better
Let's go,
deliver.
baby.
No, just what Paige loves.
Let's pay these guys more. Let's give Al another, let's give Mickey another fucking $1 million.
Hey, dude, Mickey's worth every penny.
Well, I think Mickey's staying. So who else goes? Because I have a feeling Ryan Day's not done yet. And we're going to see at least one other defensive coach. Who's it going to be?
That it's Al Washington. I know I could give a shit. I think Kerry Combs is he's a motivator. He develops players. I mean, look at the players he's put in the NFL. I don't think he's a defensive coordinator.
No,
but he is a player developer, and I'd hate to see him go. But Al Washington, take a pay cut. Please. Yeah, he'll take a pay cut.
Yeah. And so if Combs wants to stick around and coach the defensive backs, I'm all for it. He is a proven commodity there. Al Washington, I think it's time for a change there. I think it's time for a new voice.
What does he fucking do? Like literally, what does he do?
Well, and just to kind of have things play out, the way that is so publicly with Kayvon Pope. And, I'm not going to.
Oh, my God.
Right.
I can't even believe half the shit that these kids are saying.
Yeah. So,
who was the other ones? It was Kayvon Pope, he was the second one to come. Oh, Marcus Williams, Williamson.
Right. Well, yeah, but he's not a linebacker.
But I mean, they all were talking about the culture and racing and all this shit. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, and that speaks to, and maybe that might happen when you fire the head of the defense or you demote the head of your defense mid-season, right? That there's going to be some dissension among the ranks, which is what happened. So, yeah, I think there's going to be at least one more change, and I'm hoping that they replace Washington and they're able to convince Combs to stick around and coach the defensive backs. But we'll see. We'll see.
All right, question.
Yeah,
is Jim Harbaugh the coach at Michigan next year?
Nope.
You think he's gone?
Raiders.
Man, I don't know. So I'm going to say no, because he's been at Michigan 7 seasons. This is his longest stop. I think he was in Stanford for 4 years. He was the Niners for 4 years. He likes to move around. There's a lot of good jobs open who have good quarterbacks, right? You got the Bears with Justin Fields. You got Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. If he wants to go back and coach in the NFL, now's the time, because you could get you need that franchise quarterback, right? That's the number one. I think he goes. What do you think, Paige?
100%. I think he's gone. And I think the biggest reason is I don't think anybody takes a 50% pay cut and stomachs that well. And then you look at what these other guys are getting paid.
Yeah.
I think he's pissed. And I think, he can leave with his head held high as well.
That's
a
big factor too. Yeah.
Yeah. And he also is probably looking at it going, yep. And I'm not going to probably beat these guys for the next 4 years. I think those three reasons he's out.
I might as well go out on top. Ohio State 1 out of 7 times.
Yeah. I mean, even if I can get past Ohio State, there's no way in hell I'm beating Georgia or Alabama. No, I mean, they're just not recruiting at that level.
Right.
Yeah.
That's totally.
Yeah. Okay. So, wow.
We're all on record. He's out of there.
Yeah, I think so. You started talking me into it the other day. Yeah, I think so.
100%.
Wow.
Beat it, Jimmy.
Okay, next question. Okay, next. Are we happy about that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter to me who's coaching over there. I bet they got their win and congratulations, but Ohio State is still, we're still talking about 17 of the last 21 or whatever. And
they're talking about Matt Campbell possibly, or
what about elevating their young offensive coordinator, whose name escapes me, Josh Gaddis.
Oh yeah,
that would be a horrifically bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It would leave Michigan in the lurch for sure if he took off right now. I mean, would Luke Fickell take that job? No way.
No, he's waiting for Ohio State.
Yeah. Okay.
If that ever comes
if they go with Gaddis, or I've also heard Hart, I will I'll laugh for a week, right?
Oh man, I tell you, Michigan fans getting pretty chesty after that win. They were flying a little close to the sun, I thought. It's funny. I work with a guy who also a big college football fan. He stopped by, and though he's not, didn't have any skin in the game, in Ohio State, Michigan, but he has a friend who's a big Michigan fan who bet him not only that Michigan would win the national championship, but he gave my buddy the field. He's like, you get the field, I'm taking Michigan. And then he was like, also all in on Aiden Hutchinson winning the Heisman Trophy. It was just so funny. I mean, but you saw it. I mean, Michigan fans and their players, everybody just flying a little too close to the sun. And you heard it immediately after that game with the, born on third base comment by Harbaugh and some of the other things that the Michigan players and coaches were saying. Would be pretty hilarious. After all that, you get your ass kicked by Georgia and your coach leaves for the NFL.
By the way, I'm sorry, I haven't been that freaking giddy watching a football game when Georgia just kicked the shit out of them, play after play after. That was just
it was ugly.
Pure New Year's Eve enjoyment. So kudos to you, Michigan. You beat us on a blizzard, 1 out of 18 years. Here's your reward, you sons of bitches. That was freaking glory. Might have been better than the only thing that eclipsed it was RW and because how that game turned out, and that was entertaining as shit. Right. But it didn't matter what happened because I was so freaking happy watching them get embarrassed on national championship.
I was too.
Or national TV. That was awesome.
What did you guys think of the other semifinal? Is the takeaway that Cincinnati belonged? I don't. That wasn't my takeaway. I mean, you give up 300 yards.
I take that away, but I wouldn't say that they didn't belong.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they didn't belong, and I wouldn't say they belonged either. I guess look at it this way: if you lose by 3 touchdowns, you give up 300 yards rushing, and you barely eclipse 200 yards of total offense yourself. If it's Ohio State, what are we saying about Ohio State after that game, right? They're getting a lot of criticism. They got their ass kicked. Where do they go from here? They don't belong. There's a different, we're grading Cincinnati on a different scale. I just it was totally predictable. There were a bunch of people that wanted Cincinnati in that game. They wanted to see something different. And I'm like, it's not going to be different. They're going to get their ass kicked. And I know they kept it within, they didn't lose 56 to 3, but I wouldn't say they really belonged either. I mean, that was not a very good running team. Bama running
if
team.
you watch that game, they had no chance.
They had no chance.
They had no chance on both offensive and defensive line. They were just completely overmatched. And the other big takeaway to me is college football has a big freaking problem on their hand because we are clearly probably the 3rd best team, historically over the last 10 years. And then there's nobody else. I mean, Clemson's fallen off a cliff. What are you going to do about this? This is an issue with Alabama and Georgia just absolutely separating themselves from the pack. I mean, and we have our moments, but let's just be honest. We've been on that stage in the semifinals and, gone home with our tails between our legs, and Michigan State did it. Notre Dame does it. Cincinnati does it. And to your point, Zach, it's, they're going to have to do something. And I don't know, expanding the playoff is, even though I think it's going to happen, want it to happen, it's going to be better. Aren't you still just going to end up with Alabama in the national championship?
You might very well. I mean, if you have to go through an extra round to get to the championship game, it might make it more difficult. I think either way, it has to be more inclusive. Or otherwise, and I said this to you, Paige, college football, this popularity isn't going to last forever. And I think you start losing fan bases, and then you become a regional sport, just like baseball has become. You have to include more schools, more fans, more fan bases in the playoff. I mean, how great would it have been if the Rose Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl on Saturday were playoff semifinals? Yeah. And then I just think you have to be more inclusive. You really do. And if we end up with the same result, with the Alabama Georgia championship game, then so be it.
No, there's going to be some better. Texas A&M is going to be a really good football team next year.
What are they paying $1 million for every 5-star that signs with them?
Yeah. Do we know what's going on with that? Is that real? What is happening with that?
I mean, it's
insane.
$1 million in guaranteed NIL money. I mean, I don't think they're getting like an envelope of cash, but I mean, I think they're getting NIL opportunities.
Is that real? Is that what happened? I mean, they just signed like 17 5-star players, right?
Yeah.
Something.
A lot of big fucking player boosters down there in Texas.
Oh yeah. I don't know for sure exactly. I mean, I don't really pay that close attention to that program, but I mean, their recruiting class this season was notable. I mean,
yeah, like
big time.
Oh my God. But
they'll fuck it up. They won't win a national championship.
Yeah. Fucking Jimbo's a fucking clown.
Well, I mean, as long as you're in the same division of the same conference as Nick Saban, I mean, it's going to be tough.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that. All right, fellas. Pretty good effort, I got to say.
I like it. Good to be on, boys.
Well, look, thanks so much for making the time. Why don't we, let's take a few weeks off. And then as more Buckeye news pours in, we can do another pod and talk about what happens. You've been listening to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and visit our website at southstandsosu.com.